I want to thank you all for coming tonight. This is the inaugural event of the New American Dialogue series that we hope to present. My name is Ned Lampkin. I'm an organizer of this event on behalf of the Citizens the Center for Citizen Impact that's housed at the Sagamore Institute in Indianapolis. The center was established with a concern about many of the serious and divergent challenges that are facing our country and our communities today, and the social political climate that surrounds efforts to try to address those issues. That's come to the conclusion of the center that the solutions to all of these problems lie not from the top down, but from the bottom up. This in turn led the center to develop 3 steps aimed at addressing that particular problem and encourage responses from an ever-increasing number of concerned, informed, and involved citizens. Step 1 was that we daily review literature that's produced from all kinds of sources and opinions on all of these different 20 different subjects that we have chosen that are facing the country. And we extract and boil those down into documents that flow in some consistency, and then we boil that one down again into what we call the platform book, which is available on the website for K-12 education. We chose to have our inaugural event on the subject of K-12 education, as was chosen by business and educational leaders of your community. So that is the subject for the evening. And Muncie was chosen forever. People ask me this time and again. I have zero idea why my board chose Muncie, other than the fact that it used to be called Middletown, USA, as I recall. So it was supposed to be a sample of communities across the country, and thank goodness for that. So anyway, we look at those issues and we publish those documents, but the idea of the documents is to be as a platform for discussion. And in order to facilitate and encourage the discussion, we hope to have a series of town halls like this one on each of the different subjects at different communities around the country. And then the results of each of these town halls will be captured on our website, which you probably have all already seen. In addition to that, we hope, as a result of these activities, that people will then have their own conversations on these subjects in their luncheon clubs or their fraternal organizations or wherever, and that the 35 different organizations, national organizations, who are dedicated to trying to bridge the political gap in our country will pick up on what we've done and have their own documented issues as well, and add them to our website so that we have a platform for ongoing discussion among citizens across the country on the issues that are facing our country. We encourage each of you who have any questions or comments. There are people here who will hand you a pen and paper, and feel free anytime in the course of the evening to ask for one of those and write your questions or your comments, and we'll collect those. And in the second session tonight, after the intermission, we will try to address all the questions that come from you, the audience. We already have from the website a few questions that are very, very stimulating. More than I might have expected. So I think it's going to be a fun discussion in the second half. Our moderator this evening is Brandon Brown, who is the CEO of the Mind Trust, an Indianapolis education organization empowering students, educators, and communities in that community. Brandon will moderate the panel and will introduce each one as each one makes their presentation. Thank you.
All right, good evening. I just think it's amazing. It's like 70 and sunny outside, and I just really appreciate everybody spending a couple hours talking about such a big topic. We were talking earlier, it might be impossible to really get the full breadth of all of the kind of subtopics within such an important topic, but we're going to do our best over the next 90 minutes to 2 hours to at least survey many of the important topics within K-12 education, and we hope that tonight is a start of a dialogue that can continue so that we can really have robust conversations moving forward. I also think conversations like tonight are really important because oftentimes in our country we've lost the ability to talk about challenging topics where maybe everybody doesn't always agree. And I think tonight's also an opportunity for us to model how we talk about such an important issue with respect and humility and really assuming the best in each other. So really excited, hopefully, to kind of model that here, and excited for a robust conversation tonight. So I thought we could just briefly start off with our four very distinguished members of our panel giving brief introductions. So name what your role is and maybe what you're most excited about relative to the conversation that we're going to have tonight. So we will start with Superintendent.
Well, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank everybody that's here tonight. I see so many faces that I've known from the past. Kelly and I both worked in IPS together, and then Jennifer and I both worked in Warren and DOE together. So it's great to see so many people here tonight to have this conversation. My name is Kwiatkowski. I am proud to serve as the Director of Public Education and CEO for Muncie Community Schools. And what I'm most excited about tonight is we always talk about placing learners first. And through this conversation tonight, I believe that we'll always come back and focus on what's best for kids and what do we need to do for our students and our communities.
Good evening, my name is Jacquie Hanoman. I'm the Executive Director of the Ross Community Centre. I'm very honoured to be here this evening with all of you. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm quite excited this evening about the different perspectives that each one of us brings to the table and the vibrant discussion that we will have. So thank you for being here.
I am, sorry, a little bit louder. I am David Roof. I'm a faculty member at Ball State, and I run a Center for Economic and Civic Learning at Ball State. I started my career in K-12 education. I started as a teacher in California and have been at Ball State about 13, 14 years now. And on a personal level, I just wanted to mention that I've been involved with Muncie Community Schools for a long time. We have one son who is graduating from Muncie Central on Monday, and one who graduated from kindergarten yesterday. So it's great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anand Marri, and I serve as Provost for Ball State University. And I'd like my children ask me, what does a provost do? Most people don't know. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the university. I'm excited to be here because K-12 schools and spaces are the only place we have in common that almost all American children go through and adults go through. And it's a way that we can look at various multiple competing viewpoints and think about where our backgrounds play a role in what we learn, what we teach. So I'm excited to get some of the questions from you because I don't want to hear myself speak, but I'm looking forward to the questions that are coming out.
All right, great. So to frame up the evening, our core question, which I'm going to read, because we did collectively spend some time wordsmithing this, and kind of want this to be a really constructive conversation, not just about what's not happening right, but what's happening and how can we really try to build off of those strengths as well. So here's the frame for the conversation tonight. The education of our children is a major factor impacting not only their futures, but that of our communities and country. Are there additional ways our education system can apply common goals and values to improve our current educational efforts at all levels to ensure our students are adequately prepared? So the flow of tonight's evening is that all four of the folks on our panel will give 10 to 12 minute opening remarks that specifically relate to their experiences, their perspectives, and some topics that they wanted to raise up in the conversation. Then we'll take a short break and would really encourage everybody to submit as many questions as you can. We will compile those questions into themes. Then the second half of the evening will be a Q&A, where we hope to get into a variety of topics that you all want to dive into a little bit more deeply. So that's the goal for tonight. We will certainly end at 9 o'clock or maybe a little bit before to get you out on time, but we're really excited for a conversation. And you know what, I couldn't have defined what a provost was before you just said that. So Chief Academic Officer, I think we're gonna start with you.
So I do have to say, these perspectives are solely my own and do not represent those of the university. So I am speaking from a perspective of being a former high school social studies teacher and a teacher in multiple states, 4 states to be exact, as a parent as well, serving as a government official, as well as working in the corporate sector, for-profit sector as well. And so I'm going to title mine that issues that really matter in K-12 is the way I've conceptualized it, and I'm putting the time frame of 2020 and afterwards because I think that has been such a fundamental shift in how we conceptualize K-12 schools as well as universities and on our lives. So it's that last decade of this decade starting 2020. So educators, parents, government officials, and the corporate sector today can only make initial assessments about the short-term and long-term impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on K-12 students, teachers, and staff. However, from my perspective, 4 issues have risen to the top of the priority list as we work to overcome the challenges faced since 2020 and its aftermath. The 4 are an increased focus on equity, promoting digital competence, addressing learning loss, and supporting social and emotional development. The pandemic shed harsh light on the continuous inequitable resources and contacts faced by K-12 students, teachers, staff, families across the United States. Factors such as race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnic background, English proficiency, immigration status, socioeconomic status, or disability to continue to determine the inequitable opportunities available to students, teachers, staff, and parents. Educators can promote equity in classrooms by ensuring that all students receive the resources they need, for example, so they can graduate prepared for success after high school. And as you can probably see, the General Assembly in Indiana has moved towards that. I prefer preparation for after school, what's it called, the GPS diploma as one way to do that. We as educators must promote and support practices and policies that foster equity and excellence for each student in the context of teaching and learning in a racially, ethnically, linguistically, and socioeconomically diverse settings. First point. The second one, the numerous experiences of parents, educators, and students during this pandemic has shown us that we must continue to improve the digital experiences of our students. We have learned that the digital divide, first analyzed by scholars in the 1990s and early 2000s, continues to negatively affect families from low and moderate income families. Further, some households with service available struggle to maintain sufficient speeds or can afford it, meaning that an essential public service remains unattainable for many U.S. households. The last mile problem was showed if you look at the last stats from 2020 and beyond. And I know Muncie Community Schools tried to address that, for example, by providing those hotspots, opening up the public libraries and so forth. But those worked, and those worked because some people have access to cars, but that's why having those mobile buses and so forth was really helpful. Schools still must address the challenges of providing access, quality internet access for all students, especially for virtual environments. In meeting these challenges, educators must work to provide more strategies on how to best implement technology in classrooms. We see a divide in students that come from low and moderate families doing rote learning in classrooms on technology, while those come from a higher economic background, have access to resources, continue to do work that's inquiry-based. That is something that's valued in both in the workplace as well as in post-secondary institutions. Third, learning loss from COVID-19 continues to have far-reaching effects that would likely exacerbate long-standing opportunity gaps in K-12 schools. Unfortunately, most students have fallen behind because of the move to remote learning, but students of color and students from low and moderate income backgrounds have continued to fare worse. Given this growing learning loss, educators should concentrate on addressing the learning loss experienced by many PK through 12 students. And you can see that math grades, if you look at the latest research on math grades as well as literacy grades, are basically, they're falling behind maybe 1 to 2 grade levels at a time, and that's going to be an exponential, it's compound interest, but in a negative way. Finally, the pandemic has forced educators to adopt curriculum and pedagogy to promote authentic and meaningful knowledge and skills. In addition to emphasizing knowledge and skills, most educators also promote social and emotional development. This involves several interrelated areas of development, including social interaction, emotional awareness, and self-regulation. And as you can probably look at those students who went through, that started high school when they were in, COVID started, as well as those in colleges. And if you walk around Ball State campus, you will see kids walking around on their phones the whole time, not really making eye contact and interacting with those. So that's really important for us to think about. And education should now emphasize the creation of performance-based assessments for skills supporting social emotional learning and trauma-enforced practice to address the effects of the pandemic on our students. So, how do we do this? How do we promote equity and excellence in our areas? First, student engagement. I argue that we know that students' learning suffers if they feel bored or do not see the value in what they're learning. We must work with teachers and caregivers to connect their coursework to their daily lives. Such strategies can boost performance, particularly for lower performing students as they see the meaning of schoolwork. And we set this up so when Leanne speaks, she's going to give you more concrete examples of how MCS is addressing it, especially through its strategic plan. The second area is academic outcomes. We should provide learning opportunities for teachers and educators to improve academic outcomes for their students, especially in mathematics and literacy, using evidence from rigorous studies. I know one example that Indiana is working towards in literacy that's evidence-based is the science of reading. I don't know what your political views are about the science of reading, what it might be, but whatever it is, base it on evidence-based learning to see if it's working or not. We can help teachers and caregivers tap into their students' existing funds of knowledge and instruction to help improve academic outcomes. Finally, emotional well-being. Research shows that students learn more when they feel emotionally and physically safe, especially if they believe their teachers have high expectations for them. We can provide professional development for teachers and caregivers to promote feelings of belonging and safety for their students and children. So, that's my take on K-12 education.
You can do that in 7.5 minutes.
Oh, thanks. Leanne, you got the extra 5 minutes.
And we joked to begin with that Anand loves to talk. So I really thought I'd have less time. So here we go. We'll see how this goes, right? Well, most of you really know Muncie or understand Muncie. And you said, why pick Muncie? But I hope you pick Muncie because we're such a special, unique place. And this is the best place to begin because we really are a special community. Speaking of special, there was special legislation in 2018, which, raise your hand if you know about the special legislation. So some do, some don't. There was special legislation for Muncie Community Schools. They had not made some of the wisest financial decisions before that time, and they used bonds to repair roof, or use bonds for salaries when they should have been paying for roofs and for HVAC systems. And so then it was time for that bond to come due, and they hadn't done the repairs that they needed to do, and they were in trouble. So they went to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly, you know, they didn't want all the schools to be affected by a bad bond rating because Muncie wasn't able to meet its obligation. And so they created special legislation They gave us a loan, a $10 million loan to get the roof work done and the HVAC systems fixed. And that special legislation, they weren't going to just hand over funds to help Muncie without making sure that the system was dramatically changed. So the way it's House Enrollment Act 1315, and the way that our system was changed was they gave President Mearns, who really, he and the board had the courage to say that they felt the obligation to lift Muncie Community Schools because they knew it was the right thing to do. And so with that, President Mearns Ball State became the partner with Muncie Community Schools, and President Mearns and his board appointed Muncie Community School Board, which is very different than most other structures. But when we talk about issues, I would say sometimes we see school boards can be an issue with how schools are run. Earlier this evening, I was talking about in K-12 education, it's a very sophisticated system. The finances are sophisticated, the education is sophisticated, and if you have board members who don't understand many of the different topics, the legal aspects, they may not always know how to ask the administration the right type of questions, or they may have particular interest and not look at it holistically. Well, President Mearns, I give him great credit for creating or selecting a wonderful school board for Muncie Community Schools. So each member of our board has a unique skill. We have someone who is a bank president, so when he looks at our finances, he asks really tough questions. We have someone who works for the YWCA, and race and equity are some of her top priorities. We have a couple attorneys, so they really are able to dig down. One also does a lot of mediation. So when we have folks who are a little disgruntled, he does a great job with helping everybody see the different viewpoints and being able to come to a good consensus. We have a board member who also works for Ball State, who is over all of the engineering and design. So when we do any renovations, we have an expert on our team. Who am I forgetting, Chuck? I think I've listed. I would hate to forget somebody. But we have a fabulous school board. Not every school district is that fortunate to be able to have people around them who are looking for the best for the school and for the community. So I think that's an issue we see across the country. I would say that you get many school boards that become politically divided, and I am positive if I ask each member of our board what party they belong to, we would have people vote different ways, but I don't know for sure, because we really don't let politics at all get in the way. We think about students, what's best for students, and when you talked about let's work as tonight at model and show how we respect and have civility, that's what happens all the time with our school board. So they're always modeling what we would like to see. So that was one of the key components of House Enrollment Act 1315. The other that was a little controversial is that we didn't have to recognize collective bargaining. And so we do not recognize collective bargaining, but I would say we talk to more teachers and hear from more teachers and address issues, and we've given better raises, and we've really tried to treat our teachers the right way, better than I would say any district is doing, because we just know the teachers are the heart of the district, and we need to make sure we equip them to be able to do their jobs well. Our strategic plan, we have 5 different pillars, so I'm going to keep me on time. I have 5 extra minutes. So. The first is pre-K. So I think that's another issue that we have today regarding issues. It's really not K-12, but it affects K-12. And so with pre-K, it inspires learning, supports social and emotional skills, creates community, and makes sure students are kindergarten ready. We have put pre-Ks in all of our buildings, and I can tell you from that point, we do a kindergarten readiness assessment, and 5 years ago, we had most of our students not ready for kindergarten. We are seeing that number improve year after year after year. So we really believe, we see evidence that high quality pre-K programs are beneficial to our students. Studies show students who participate in a high quality pre-K are 3 times more likely to be proficient readers by grade 3, which is needed for long-term success, and 90% of a child's brain is developed by the time they're 5. So pre-K education is extremely important. Other issues with that, we don't receive funding for pre-K. So we are using some of our federal Title I dollars. We're using state On My Way pre-K. We're using as many different funding sources to be able to offer pre-K. But that, to me, should be something that if we see the benefit, especially in districts where there is higher poverty, we really need to provide that for no cost to our students and to our families. The other part, transportation. We cannot transport our pre-K students. We struggle in Muncie with our operations budget, which is another issue for us, the way that the funding for transportation and things like school safety come through property taxes. And Muncie, we are one of the 6 districts in Indiana who have the biggest impact from property tax caps. Now, I'm a homeowner, and I appreciate knowing every year my taxes aren't going to increase. But we have to find other solutions because we are really hit hard by it. We are supposed to receive $21 million for operations. So again, that's repairing buildings, transportation, custodians, our insurance, our business office, our HR office, our superintendent's office. We try to stay very lean. We're supposed to receive $21 million and we receive between 10 and 11 million. So per student, they are seeing about a $2,000 hit compared to other districts. So I have a thorough report that we put together, which I'm sharing with all members of the General Assembly, because this really needs to be something that's done at the legislative, trying to find some other solutions. We know property taxes is in the Constitution, so that would be hard to change that. So we now have to find a solution, how we can help our districts impacted the most, be able to find ways to help them in areas where we're being impacted. The second pillar of our strategic plan is recruiting high-quality teachers and leaders and retaining them. And so we know that, across the nation there's been narrative about why you shouldn't get into teaching. And teaching is a hard, hard job. Our teachers put a lot of time and effort, and they're responsible for motivating every single student in their classroom. That's not always easy to do if the student doesn't feel like being motivated that day, but we really challenge our teachers to do that. And so we need to make sure we're paying them at competitive wages. We need to make sure that we're giving them opportunities for professional growth. We need to give them as many opportunities to continue learning and growing and staying energized. And then we don't want to just lose our teachers to other fields or to administration because they want to make more money. So we need to create career pathways so we can keep our best and brightest teachers in the classrooms. They are really the key. The third part of our one other thing I just recently read, but I don't have the facts, so it may be false. Maybe I shouldn't say this. But I just read an article where they said 1/4 of teachers resign or retire every single year. So think about the turnover of that. That is very costly. We find that the stability makes all the difference. You get to know the students, you know the families, you understand the curriculum. It's so important to have stability. And so that recruiting teachers and leaders and retaining them is incredibly important. Our third pillar is student-centered teaching and learning. We say that's the heart of our plan. So we know academically, Muncie Community Schools, we made great progress. We are not happy at all where we are yet with our achievement. You know, they say it takes a lot to turn a cruise ship, and I feel like we're a cruise ship and we're trying to get turned, but it's not happening fast enough with academics. And so we're working really hard. We did adopt early a science of reading curriculum. And so what we're finding is that our teachers and our students are feeling that they are learning more than they ever have, and there's a knowledge piece to it as well. So they're reading about social studies and science and real parts of history, and they're excited about it. Our students are talking more about what they're reading and learning than I ever heard them do in the past. So we believe we're on the right track, but that is going to take us still more time to get there. It's never fast enough. Every time we get our scores, I call our board chair and I'm like, oh, yeah, I may not be the right person for you. He's like, give it time, Leanne, we'll get there. So I believe we will. We also know that the way of the future in jobs of the future all involve STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so how are we preparing our students for jobs of the future? So in 2021, 68% of jobs required some type of post-secondary credential. And it's estimated that that will rise to 72% in 2031. That's only in 7 years. And so how are we making sure that our students are going to be prepared? One thing that we've done in our strategic plan is that we put Project Lead the Way. It's a STEM-based curriculum, starting it in first grade all the way through high school. So we feel that if students are experiencing coding and learning engineering skills when they're young, when they get to middle school and high school, they'll continue selecting those courses because they'll either be interested or they'll know that they're good at it and they can do that. We believe very much in the arts. We know that so many students, if they aren't connected or they don't find reading and math interesting, they may find that they're really good at art and that art teacher inspires them and encourages them to keep doing better with their core academic subjects. So we really believe in art and music and physical ed and all the different arts. We try to support them. And I think that's important for being a well-rounded person, is to have many different experiences and learn about many different things. Right now, one of the big topics is how to redesign high schools. So I just read another report. I read a lot and I can't really remember where I read it from or if I'm making it up. But I read that, that about 50% of students are feeling connected in high school. Well, boy, if we're going to need 72% of jobs in the future need some type of credential, we need more than 50% of our students to feel connected. And so how do we do that? What do we need to do? So the state is looking at new diploma requirements. We're trying to help students understand careers and opportunities and what that means for them. And we're trying to connect them with outside experiences. Those real world experiences we think can help students see the relevancy of going to school. And then we know that we had tremendous learning loss. Our kids' formative years were disrupted by a global pandemic, and we will be seeing the effects of that for many years. And so through all of our community work, we're trying to offer additional help, and our community also is supporting us with that. I know Jacquie next to me runs programs after school and in the summer, so we have many groups that do that. But when we think about issues for the future, I think about AI, artificial intelligence. What is that going to mean to schools? It's going to mean something very different than what it is today. I was having a conversation and they said Bill Gates said he's only seen 2 things that really have been disruptors. And one was, the computer and internet. And he said the next one is going to be AI. It's going to really change the way everything looks. And so, schools are going to have to shift and adapt and to be ready and to help students be ready. So what does that look like? We are all going to have to figure that out. And so that is one of our areas for the future.
This is your 1-minute warning.
Okay. Let's see how fast. Social emotional learning is our 4th pillar, so we know how important. Some call it social emotional learning, some call it character ed, some call it civics ed. We know that we need more of that. And family and community engagement, parents as partners. How do we get parents to come together and make sure that we're in this as a partnership and we're all trying to move forward with our students? Other issues, so you should never have asked me about issues. How many did you say there were, Ned? Like 27? I probably hit on, 20 of them? So we'll keep going. I say attendance is our new area of crisis. We have more students miss school than we ever had before the pandemic. While it's improving, it's still terrible. And if students are not in school, they're not going to be learning. And so that isn't, and again, it goes back to relevancy and wanting students there, but it's not just high school students that are missing. We have kindergartners, 1st graders, 2nd graders. They're all missing way too many days of school. So we have to shift that. And then ensuring all of our students are successful. So how do we personalize learning to make sure that our students are ready for the future? Part of the way we do that is raising expectations, and that again is a challenge, but we're trying. So I'll be done. Is that my time?
That's your time, but we are on schedule because you took a lot of this time. So. We're good. All right. Yes.
People will hold up their hand. Someone will bring them pen and paper if they have questions or comments to share with the panel. So feel free at any point to just raise your hand, and Robert will come along with that. And at intermission, we'll collect all of those.
I hope those questions aren't for me. I hope they're for Anand.
They're going to be really tough ones. All right, so we will transition to David now for his opening remarks.
Okay, well, I want to begin by thanking Ned, and just say that I'm really honored to be a part of this panel. So it's just really wonderful. And I want to thank Dr. K for setting up my comments, because I will talk about civic education a bit, but I do think that what I'm really talking about is the social role of education in preparing students for their role as citizens and to be part of our community and our society. And when I talk about this, I always like to mention that this was very clear for the founding of our education system. Thomas Jefferson had a real anxiety about how we were going to get a group of people together to govern themselves and work together and self-govern. And so there was a clear focus on education and its civic and role in promoting citizenship. And Horace Mann, the next major wave of public school development, emphasized civic education. And so through the 20th century, it was a key part of our public school system. And what we saw happen was during the Vietnam War, America became very polarized and people became worried about addressing this issue, and we saw a decline in civics and social studies, and then further legislation like No Child Left Behind placed a major emphasis on science and math, but I think civic education also got left behind during this time. And so the reason we should care about this topic, in 2022, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, which is the countrywide assessment, showed a decline in American history and civic education, where it had dropped below when we first started measuring for the first time. So we've seen a major decline in civics education over the last, I would say in particular, 10 to 15 years. And we also know from research and data on this topic that the largest disparities are in Title I districts and more diverse districts. It's what Circle refers to as civic deserts across the country, and that's where the real disparity is happening. Some students do have access to a robust and quality civic education, but it's it does not reach all students equitably. And so I want to talk a little bit about a project that I run with Muncie Community Schools called the CREATE Project. And in 2022, we received a $1.5 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education to work on civics education in Muncie Community Schools. And we have funding to promote field trips and activities, to do professional development with teachers, to provide curriculum and resources. And I'll share a little bit of those experiences with you. And one of the catalysts for this project was a new middle school mandate. And so now, starting this year, Indiana schools became one of 9 states with a required middle school course for civics. And what had happened in the United States is before this mandate in Indiana, and still around most of the country today, students go through their entire K-12 education, and then in their last semester of senior year, when sometimes they're not the most excited about learning new things, they are told, you're going to now take a government class and learn about how our system of government, works. And so this is an opportunity we feel to extend civic learning throughout the K-12 spectrum. And so our project is focused on elementary through high school, all students. And one of the mantras that I like to repeat over and over again is, we are not trying to compete with the other priorities of education. And the science of reading, the curriculum adapted by MCS, Core Knowledge, Language Arts, has a lot of social studies materials available. And what we're hoping to do is connect and make a stronger connection between the literacy effort and what our project is doing. And one of our most successful sessions with teachers this last year was a math teacher talking about how she takes students and uses math to teach them civic skills. And one example would be she had her students look at a new proposal for solar, to promote solar energy, and the students did a cost-benefit analysis, and then they made a proposal and took it before the city council to present it. And so we are trying to reach out to all teachers and integrate civics throughout the various curriculum areas. Another example is this last year for Black History Month, we had a lot of music programs. We did one celebrating Frederick Douglass at Ball State, where we invited students from around the district, and we are just trying to connect in all areas. We've held a Civics Day at Muncie Central High School, and that was a phenomenal effort led by a local teacher, and we saw kids. I never thought I would see high school kids sign up and volunteer to pick up trash around their campus, but they did, and they planted trees. President Burns came, and I got nervous because the kids were nervous. And but as soon as we broke ground with the first shovel and began digging holes, we did not have enough shovels. They all wanted to plant a tree and be involved in it. And I love driving by Central now and seeing the new trees. And some have fared well, better than others, but most of them are still there. So we're pretty excited about it. And we also talked, to students during that time about, policies around planting trees and why trees get cut down, and the responsibility to provide trees and access. And so some stories I'd like to share from our project is that we have taken hundreds of students to the State House as just one example. Hundreds have gone to the Indiana State House, which is a beautiful building, and I love going along. And I think one of the things that stands out is they are always kind of blown away by the fact that you can walk into the governor's office and walk around, and they ask about it. And I love the tour guides will say over and over, this is the people's house. And so I think in a very tangible way, those trips and activities help convey our values to students. And another one of my favorite stories is one of the early trips that we did. There was a young African-American middle school student from Northside Middle School. And sometimes you don't know if middle school students are paying attention or what they're absorbing. And afterwards, we had somebody with a camera taking some video to put together a promotional video for our project. And this girl was asked about what stood out to her. And she pointed to a portrait in the Supreme Court chambers of Myra Shelby, who was our first female justice, who was also a woman of color. And she said that if she could be the first female Supreme Court justice, it made me feel like I could change the world. And that's one of the stories from our project that really has resonated with me. And I wanted to mention, we just talked about teacher retention, and I will be in Washington, D.C. next week, actually, at the Department of Education, and talking about teacher retention, which is the theme of this year's annual meeting. And with our project, we're trying to highlight and spotlight teachers who are doing a great job at engaging students in our community. So I think, while there are, I think, academic challenges in Muncie, there are so many things that go unnoticed, by people in our community that Muncie teachers are doing every day. And so much more we could do to highlight those successes and those things. So moving forward, with our project, we are trying to build a coalition focused on civic education, and I know we have a representative from the Bar Foundation here who's our kind of statewide leader and championing this. But we're trying to make connections with other organizations and others to, to build our capacity. The Indiana Senate recently passed a civic seal legislation, and in the coming years, this will be used to recognize excellence among students who excel in civic engagement. It'll be a seal on their diploma, and so we still have to work out the criteria for it. But one of the things I really appreciate is that it will also recognize schools that do an excellent job in promoting civic engagement. And my secret hope is to make MCS the first one on the list of recipients of those seals, but we'll see what happens. And so yeah, those are the primary remarks, and so thank you.
All right, sounds great. So just remember to get in your questions, and then Jacquie will take the first part of our evening home.
Thank you so much. I specifically asked to be the last. I want to say, well, first of all, thank you, Anand and Brandon. Thanks the Center for Citizen Impact and the Mind Trust Institute for inviting us this evening. I wanted to be last because I am not part of the schools. I'm outside of the schools. And I'm at the Ross Community Center, and the focus of my center is to build community as we advance education, lifelong learning, health, and wellness through our diverse programs, activities, events, and services. So my contribution to the panel this evening is to highlight the importance of how learning outside of the classroom, family, and community life shape the educational journeys of our youth. And indeed, their lifelong learning. That is really my passion, lifelong learning. So the overarching topic of our discussion this evening is a new American dialogue. And in my view, this means that we need to reconceptualize how we think about our educational systems. Just as my co-panelists have been saying, understanding the societal dynamics that shape the lives of our youth and how these affect their learning. So we've been talking this evening about education as formal education, learning within the institution. We've talked about civic education. We've had a great emphasis on social emotional learning. But yet this learning, as we've mentioned, does not take place in a vacuum. Our children's learning, as we all know, is shaped by their home life, parents, guardians, siblings, aunties, uncles, their extended family life, other adults in their life, their friends, their neighborhood, their community, and the different social, economic, political, religious, and other systems in which they live. Their world, our world as such. So their learning, all of our learning, is also non-formal and informal. Non-formal education is structured or organized learning opportunities that take place outside of the formal academic education system. So for adults, these are like workshops, trainings, courses. For children, this would be, for example, structured after-school programming, summer programming, following an out-of-school curriculum. Informal learning is our everyday learning, unstructured, spontaneous, that takes place in our social interactions. So, when children play. When a child plays, as they interact with their peers in their homes, in their communities. So the circumstances in which our youth live and the opportunities that they're given to extend their learning beyond the classroom influence how they learn. As I said, out-of-school programs are non-formal and informal educational structures. So when well developed, these programs and activities enhance in-school education. That is the formal education. So what do we do? You know, in our after-school, out-of-school programming, we tutor them in specific subjects to strengthen weak academic areas. They do interesting projects to enhance their knowledge, creativity, and imagination. They learn as they play, and they let their minds roam freely. And very importantly, they enhance their social emotional skills, which is what we've been talking about this evening. So this is a fundamental discussion of education that is not as often mentioned, but we have mentioned it this evening. When discussing what the major issues of our educational systems face, we tend to focus, and rightly so, on issues such as our children reading below grade level, understanding math below grade level, escalating, something that has happened a lot, even more since the pandemic, escalating behavior issues in the classroom, teacher burnout, food insecurity that they face, rising numbers of homeschooled children, and so forth. Do not get me on the topic of homeschooling. It is one of the most difficult things, which are extremely important issues that we must indeed confront and find solutions to. What we do not often ask, however, is why these issues are so prevalent and what are their underlying causes. And when we do ask these questions, many times the most evident reasons seem to be a breakdown in the family structure, drug and alcohol addiction, divorce, the challenges of poverty, lack of parental knowledge and control, lack of parental interest in their children's education, and so many more. In great part, and we see this every single day at our center and in other places where I've worked around the world, because of the challenges that our children face in their daily life, education falls to the bottom of the list of priorities. In the face of the challenges of multidimensional poverty, living in families with addiction, abuse, food insecurity, and so forth, battered by the daily stress of challenges. So how can a child who lives in a state of chaos or anguish and despair at home be ready to function well in school, to open to learning? It's something we see every day. Behavior issues, children who want to learn, but living in such chaotic circumstances sometimes. So it's easy to blame the lazy parent, the drug-addicted parent, the functional literate parent, or the guardian for the lack of interest in school, or they're not giving them sufficient support at home, reading to them every evening, for example. There are indeed such parents, and they do negatively influence their children's reading or math level. But the deeper question is why these parents are like this. What has led them to living in these situations? When we look at these closely, we realize that these difficult situations, parents, guardians, children, communities are living in, have created societal dynamics, as I said before, that are not conducive to learning and growth. These are indeed systemic issues, systemic problems as such, and systemic problems need systemic solutions. So what I would like to emphasize is the importance of well-being and safety, and Provost Marri mentioned safety, as being at the center of our learning and development of our children and of us as human beings. When children live in adverse circumstances, they have difficulty focusing on their learning. When they feel unsafe physically and emotionally, they have difficulty focusing on learning. So it's not the role of the school or any academic institution to solely fix these problems. It is the role of institutions outside of school, such as my center, in partnership with schools, with community colleges, with universities, with organizations that work with early childhood resources, family resources, prenatal, out-of-school programs, libraries, and so many others, who all address different dimensions of societal life to work together through our respective missions and strengths to enhance learning, to enhance well-being, physical and emotional safety of our students and of their families. So at our center, for example, we have diverse educational and recreational programs, activities, services, and events for babies, toddlers, elementary-aged children, their parents, and concerned adults, adult lifelong learning, and more to enhance their learning and well-being. But we do not do it alone. We have over 25 partnerships and collaborations with diverse organizations that focus on different issues, going from early childhood education to music education, science, art, family coaching, English as a new language classes, drug addiction and peer recovery, food insecurity, horticulture, housing, health and wellness, trauma-informed care, LGBTQ plus issues, maternal health and more. And our community members, those adults that are with our children, are at the center of working together to improve their lives because they are the organic intellectuals of their own realities. So working together, schools, community organizations, academic institutions, community members, and by supporting our community members, including the parents, guardians, and other concerns in adult lives, to develop their community social capital, their own community resources. We work with them to become stronger, and thus we walk hand in hand with our children to enhance their personal growth and learning. So civic education, social emotional learning, children who are safe, safety. My experience has shown me at the Ross Community Center and other places, they have to feel safe. So where they are safe physically and emotionally, children who are healthy and secure emotionally and with sustainable access to healthy food, children who are supported with multiple resources can learn better. So this, what I've described above, is the multidimensional intersectionality of formal education, out-of-school learning, strengthening families, strengthening community social capital, and our political, religious, and cultural systems shaped by our history. And that's what I really want to leave us with tonight, that to improve our children's learning, we really need to understand these, how they influence learning, and how they shape our children's destinies. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Jackie. So let's give all four of them a round of applause. It is 8:02, so we're going to take a short 10-minute break, and we will get the questions collected, and then we will spend the last 45 minutes of the evening in a very exciting Q&A session. So we'll see you back at 8:12. So I thought we might be able to level set on one of the reasons why we're here and get some thoughts from our panelists on kind of a question that will permeate, I think, a lot of the questions on substance later. So first question, and anybody can take it. What do the panelists believe to be effective lines of argumentation that could build consensus and transcend the current state of our political polarization, and then hopefully cultivate more support for increased investments in education? So how can we, transcend the current divisive political climate and, make education a conversation that can be used to build consensus?
Well, I will just kind of try to get us started by referring to something Provost Marri said earlier, which is our education system is the only institution in the United States that every citizen goes through. Every individual in our society is, presumably, I know we have homeschooling, but for the most part, it is the most far-reaching, impactful, institution in our country. And my early career was spent a lot working overseas. I've been in Afghanistan, and I was talking earlier about Pakistan, and I don't think we appreciate how important the stability of our country is to our economy and all other facets of life. So I do think, even though we're in a very, polarized state, I do feel like, most lawmakers really understand the importance of our schools and, promoting a stable and society where students can talk across differences. I always like to say too, we don't need a democracy if we all agree on everything. The only thing worse than having a country in which there's disagreement would be, I think, something like total agreement. Like, I assume you only get that in countries like North Korea, or so I think we really have to kind of understand that we do live in a country where people are going to disagree and have differences, but we've created a system where we can do that with stability and agreement. Yeah.
So anybody like to add on? So one thing that we often wrestle with, both at my organization and I know schools and policymakers do, is how do we balance accountability and autonomy? So clearly the state needs to know what their return on investment is, right? So there needs to be some form of assessment for the education system, but oftentimes that might be perceived by educators as infringing upon their professional autonomy. So would love thoughts around this accountability versus autonomy question, and can they both live together, or might they ultimately be in conflict?
Sure. I'll try my best with this one. So I'm all for looking at it from an ROI, but let's think about the time frame you're talking about, right? So unfortunately, we're not a for-profit shareholding company when we do education. Let's remember that. So there's a focus that if you invest in the market, you're thinking about short-term, quarter to quarter to quarter. But for us, the ROI is on a lifetime. So why not think about, yes, we can have that argument. What we're doing in schools matters, and it does pay a positive difference. Just change the time frame for it, right? So there's no way that you're expecting to have systematic change, have our kids that have not had the resources at home to be able to turn on a dime. We don't do that in any way, any other field whatsoever. In medicine, no one expects you to beat cancer within a day or a year, right? Because there are remission rates in all those that are going over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So why do we hold schooling to be within that time frame?
Yeah.
So this is where I believe, I know a lot of people are really against having a state test. I actually think that we need some type of measuring stick where, we all have common expectations. Yes, some families may have many more experiences and their kids had different opportunities and they can get there, but I believe that all children can learn and that we can rise all children. So if we have those measuring sticks, it helps us to see if we're moving and that we're making sure kids are growing. So I think it's important to have that, but I think that what hurt us was then when it was like it was a hammer by measuring. So instead of just using it to make sure that we know that we're doing the right things or shifting if we're not. So that's where I believe that we can have autonomy, especially if we see there's growth happening. We try to look, we use data all the time, and I'll tell you, if we see classrooms where we're seeing good growth, we just give thumbs up and keep doing what you're doing and share that good work with others. But if we have some where we see students are falling back, then we need to intervene more. So I think we have to be, allow autonomy when it's deserved, I guess, is how I would see it. So I believe they both can exist at the same time.
Would love to stay with you for just a second, Leanne. How do you think about growth versus proficiency in, kind of when you're evaluating what's happening within your district? Is there one that you look at more than the other?
They're both important to me. because we can be growing, but we have to know where we're trying to go. So are we proficient or not? Are we reading at 3rd grade? If not, what are steps we can do with Muncie schools, with our community providers, with our families to help students get there? So that's why we also want to recognize growth, because if we are growing, and I'm very proud, this was the first year, based on our formative assessments, that all of our elementary schools were in the high growth area. Well, that doesn't mean on the final results we're going to be proficient. I bet if we keep having high growth year after year, we'll get there. So they're both important.
That's right. So there were several questions about school funding, which I think all 4 of you mentioned in some way in your opening remarks. So would love any ideas around how do we make both the K-12 education system funding more equitable, but then to Jacquie's point about the importance of out-of-school time. How might our legislators and the leaders in our communities think about funding the whole of education in a way that's more equitable, so that the kids that need the money the most are getting that?
Do you mind? I'll go ahead and
Go ahead.
start. So I was very fortunate in my career that I worked out of the Department of Education for multiple years, and then I also served under Governor Holcomb as his senior education advisor for a couple of years. So I worked really closely with our legislators at the State House. And again, do I agree with all of them? No, no one elected me though, so you have to work with all the folks that are elected. And I think all of them in their own way think they're doing good things for education, and they all have different approaches to it. So one thing I learned is, it's like your home budget. You get a pot of money, and you then have to decide how you divide it up. And so, our General Assembly, they give, we hear them say 50% goes to education, and then we have all these other areas we have to fund. So it really helped me realize when we want more for education, and as a CEO, yes, I could find many good ways to use more money, but I also realize for a state, we have a lot of other type of interests that still need funded. And so, I think that we always have to look to make sure that the funds are being used the wisest. Sometimes, it's hard when you build relationships or you've had a program you worked hard on. You may not want to say we're not going to do that anymore and use the funds other ways. You just want more funds to be able to do something else with. So I think we have to look at the way we use our funds. But I have said the way the operations fund works is not fair for schools. It's not an equal way of funding. I just read where charter schools in Indianapolis are saying we can't get kids here. We need some funding for it. And I thought, well, I'm first on the list because I'm a public school. Well, they're public schools.
Charter schools are public schools.
I know. I just said it before you did, Brandon. But we don't have the right kind of funding either. So that is something we have to look at, not just for particular sections of the state, but it really needs to be looked at holistically. So we're having those conversations, and the question always is, well, where does this come from? And that's where, if you have to, there are many different you either have to change the entire system, which takes a lot of effort, or you create standalone grants that people can apply for. And if others have ideas, we're open to try to help legislators think creatively about it.
And to the point that you made earlier, the very fact that we fund such a significant portion of the education system based on local property taxes, which are directly tied to a community's wealth, is in and of itself a system that is inherently inequitable, right? So the very structure, this is me opining now, but the very structure of how we fund schools is directly of a result of a community's wealth. And that seems to be, just structurally one of the reasons why it's gonna be really hard to get to true funding equity, if we don't look at the systems and structures that, are the reason for the disparity.
So I have a shorter that's a big problem to solve, because I know when the state of Vermont tried to equalize funding and put set up a common pool of funding for all taxes to be able to do that, the wealthy school districts had a mass rebellion. But to go back to Leanne's point, I think for us, when we're talking about school financing, it's not a question of trying to get a bigger pie, a bigger portion of the pie. What Leanne said was really important. It's reallocate within that pie based on what's working and what's not working. And without a doubt, from my perspective and the research, the best investment we could do is for early childhood education. If we can invest in early childhood education from birth until they're 6, and some of that's outside of school, right, with what they're doing and everything. If we can do that, the return on that investment is without a doubt, more beneficial to our society, both in terms of productivity, as well as the social well-being than any other thing you can do. So if you could do that, you would solve a lot of problems, and you can see the largest school district in the country that serves 1.2 million people in New York City, where I grew up, where it can do pre-K, universal pre-K, right? And New York City has some of the lowest taxes in New York City per se, right? They have an income tax that's there, but their property taxes are also very low. I paid the same for a 1,500 square foot apartment that I pay in taxes here for a 6,500 square foot house. It's the same level of taxes that I pay. But they use it in a way that they reallocate it and focus on early childhood education. That is the best investment we can do within that 50 years.
Are there any thoughts from the two folks who might not work within a school every day, but are obviously doing incredibly important work in the community in partnership with schools, and kind of what can we do to make sure that there's adequate funding for the work that you do as well?
I think there is sometimes an apprehension around federal funding, and I think we should be wary of the strings that may come attached with sometimes without that funding. But I also think that Indiana residents all pay into federal taxes. We should take advantage of that money, and I would love to see increased investment in Title I funding and some other areas. And then I think Muncie should really, our community should really think more about its commitment to the schools. And I know a lot of the institutions in Muncie have people who live outside of the community, and I think we need to do more to speak about the positive things and hopefully see more of those people come into the community and back into the school district.
So, as a nonprofit organization, we receive money from the federal government, but a lot of our funding comes from foundations, family foundations, private foundations. And I think one of the good things that's happening in Muncie is that the family foundations in Muncie are focusing a lot on education. The George and Francis Ball Foundation, on the Cradle to Career, the Ball Brothers Foundation, just to mention two, United Way. I think what I have noticed is that when the foundations that we work directly with understand the importance of education, both formally, non-formally, and informally, and they use their influence, their power, to establish dialogue with the city, with the state, that has been very beneficial. So I think the funding, I believe that allowing funders, whether it's whichever level of the state, city, federal, understanding what the issues are and why, going back to how these funds are going to be allocated, if they understand how the importance of where they're being allocated, and we continually make the effort to explain what we're doing and how we're doing it, that does influence it a bit.
So several questions on teaching, the teacher shortage, and the role of schools of education. So I'm going to try to formulate that into a question, but take it wherever you want to go with it. So, we've been thinking a lot about how, there is a teacher shortage in, critical needs areas like math and science and STEM in particular. Paradoxically, at the same time, with COVID relief money going away, lower birth rates, declining enrollment in schools in general, we're probably going to see schools and school districts start to lay folks off. So on one hand, we don't have enough high quality teachers, and on one hand, we have a fiscal crunch, that will likely result in layoffs. So, would kind of love any thoughts around just, how can we ensure that as many great teachers as we can get into the system and stay in the system, as you said, Leanne. And also, what is the role of the School of Education, in particular, given that I think I recently read that the majority of new teachers are now trained by alternative certification programs. So, what role do schools of education play in ensuring that we have as many great teachers as we can in the education system and that they're ready to, meet the increasing demands that continue to be placed on them?
Well, we can't keep doing things the same way we've always done them, right? So I think about our partnership with Ball State University, and early on, there are students who recognize that they're interested in education. So how do we start tapping into those students, giving them opportunities to learn more about it and find ways to help them be successful and become a teacher and work with us and hopefully then get hired by us. So we've created a partnership with Ball State where students, I see Drew at the back, and he's an outstanding teacher, and he's really doing the first class with aspiring students who want to become teachers. We get them going, and then they do internships, apprenticeships in our schools, working with our students. Through our partnership, they're earning college credit, so they're going to be able to finish college at Ball State in 3 years rather than 4 years, saving them money. They're going to build relationships with us, and then they'll be prepared because they're learning our curriculum, they're meeting our teachers, they're learning our families. They'll even at Ball State, they'll keep having them come back working for us in those internship type of positions. Again, we're finding ways to pay them for that. And then we hope that can help us grow. I mean, we have to be creative and unique in finding different ways of attracting and retaining teachers. So we have someone here who's a Ball State student. So first thing I did on our break, I talked to him about, tell me what field you're in, and boy, we'll need that position in a few years. I mean, we're just recruiting all the time.
So Leanne hit on a major point, which is that what we've done in the past is not working, so we need to obviously pivot on that. The residency programs that we're doing, we're starting that with Hamilton Southeastern School District and other places where you start learning about being a teacher as a high school senior. And what happens is you lower the debt burden when they get to college, or when they went to Ball State or elsewhere. So they're graduating in 3 years, and in the last year, they get paid to be in school. So there's that. That's one thing we know works, residency programs. We do it for medical doctors, right? I mean, you went through a residency program, so all my family members who are doctors went through the residency program. They get this, they have a podium nut race when you're in a residency program. The second problem, the second way we know is a cohort model. The program that I went through at Stanford, they hired us within school districts as a cohort. So the school district that hired us in San Jose, there were 6 of us. And so we had that cohort that we were able to keep each other going, motivated when you have the low days and the high days to do that. And the third one is about incentives. I know you were talking about salaries, right? Teachers don't go into teaching because they want to be poor. Just let me say that, right? They don't want to do that. Incentives matter for every other occupation. And I don't understand why we don't think about incentives when it comes to education. That makes no sense. It's not like all of a sudden you are a humanoid that doesn't really, a rational being that's all of a sudden you give up everything when you become a teacher. It doesn't matter. There are incentives to do that. The school district I worked in San Jose, they gave us incentives. They gave us they worked with banks, they gave us low interest rate loans. They paid for our closing costs, right? They set up these cheap apartments that we could all live in to do that. So there are other ways to do that besides just raising salaries. And salaries do matter, as MCS has proved, but there are other ways you can incentivize participation. And why is education different than any other field? My buddies who are in hedge funds and working in private equity that I went to college with, they chose those routes because their signing bonuses are bigger than my first year paycheck by multiple folds, right? So incentives do matter. We can't ignore that when it comes to education.
And we also know right now, the rhetoric out there is you don't want to be a teacher. Well, we have to change that. And, you know, I've talked to teachers who say, you know, my daughter, my son wants to go into the field of education, and I'm encouraging them to find another profession. And if we're doing that, you know, that is really scary for our future. So I'm a proud mother of a teacher. He is a middle school teacher and loves every minute of it, but he also doesn't get some of the same benefits as two brothers do from their salaries. I see that as well. Do you guys have
I mean, I'm very biased because I work in a college of education, and I know with college students I've written letters of recommendation for like Teach for America and other programs, and you know, I think they are well-intentioned programs, but the research I'm aware of is that a lot of those people don't stay in education, and I do think teachers need adequate preparation and when they go into education. So I think the programs that we've been talking about are wonderful, but I also hope too we place an emphasis on the preparation of teachers.
I will add only one thing, which is that compensation is very important, but I think also, looking back at the American history, the pride of being a teacher. You know, can we recover that pride of, I am a teacher, you know, beyond the situations that education is going through, the issues that are plaguing education today. So that is something that is a cultural shift that will take time, but if we start working on it, I mean, as we start working on it, with time, we will be able to get there, together with everything else.
Well, as a Teach for America alum, I take no offense to your comment. I do think a valid critique of the program is the long-term retention of teachers in the classroom is, you know, not great, which, you know, what they would say at TFA is that's not really the goal of, you know, what they're doing, but that obviously is a, you know, very valid critique. So a couple comments already about the importance of reinventing high school, right? A lot of the legislation, you know, that has happened recently, a lot of the state level efforts are, you know, really geared towards making high school more relevant and, you know, thinking about credentialing and how can we get graduates ready for the workforce. Sometimes that seems like it might be in conflict to more, you know, maybe noble goals of education around, you know, creating civically engaged citizens who can go out and change the world. My opinion is they don't have to be in conflict, but if we're, you know, making trade-offs and choices, sometimes they might be. So would love your all's thoughts around how do we balance this, you know, obvious need to make sure that kids are employable in the 21st century economy, while also not losing sight of this, you know, liberal view of education that we are, you know, here to create citizens.
Yeah, so I don't think they need to compete. I really think, you know, corporations and businesses in Indiana want well-rounded students who can communicate, who can talk across differences, and are engaged in their communities. And I think too that what research indicates is that students who are, you know, who come out of high school engaged in their community and as well-rounded citizens are also the ones that excel in the careers they chose. So I for one really don't think that they need to compete. I think that career development is consistent with kind of a well-rounded education preparing students for citizenship.
I think that the way you get there is you just make sure that you have leaders in your district, your school leaders. They make sure that they still have all the different offerings and they're giving students opportunities to have different experiences. I think back to, what we've learned from No Child Left Behind. So when, schools were being measured just on their math and their reading scores and they were getting letter grades, all of a sudden everything else stopped and, everyone just focused on math and reading, and we didn't see dramatic improvement in just math and reading. So we just have to make sure that as we shift for what our high schools look like, we don't go so far that it's only about jobs and careers, but we're still creating good citizens of tomorrow.
Right, and related caution, we have to be, and we know this from what happened in California, we know what happens in Europe as well. Europe, they're able to do these tracks because there's a strong social net, safety net for those, right? So the occupational, if you go and you choose you're going to be a plumber or electrician, whatever it is, there are living wages. There's a strong safety net to allow for that to happen. We also have to be careful of tracking who gets to what level of tracking. Right? We know from poor kids of color, and kids that don't have the resources at home or the advocates at home tend to go to the lowest tracks, and they get to go into those jobs where it becomes a job, not a career. And that's something we have to be really cautious. There are a lot of kids in our rural areas here that don't have the resources to be able to make those informed choices, and that you are pigeonholed into one track or not. My personal story, I moved to the States when I was in 5th grade to Jamaica, Queens, didn't speak a word of English. And because I didn't speak a word of English, for the next 4 years, I was in the lowest track possible, right? Even though my parents were like, wait, he gets it, just try to, right? But fortunately, they were able to speak up and do well on these tests, but it's unusual, and we can't do that for a nation of all these kids, or in Indiana, to have these tracks set up. It's going to be another reified system, and we just have to be careful. And we also have to look at, that's really important for us to pay attention to.
I also think it can be exciting to think of where we can go for students. Like right now at Muncie Central, we have a stellar early college program. This year we're graduating 40 students that have associate's degrees, and 20 some are getting the Common Core degree. And we have AP courses that are doing terrific work with students. So wonderful things, but then there's still a population at our high school that I worry about at night because they aren't still getting some of those opportunities. They may not be participating at the Career Center. So I know probably, it's going to take some dramatic change in their life to give them more opportunities. And so that's where I am a little hopeful that we can create something that doesn't change, that we're still having these wonderful college-bound opportunities, but for some of the students who haven't been connecting, we're able to find ways to get them really excited and energized and on a good path for the future.
I completely agree with what all of you are saying, and I think there's one other element, which is that our children have to learn to be unafraid. There's this fear within the system and because of the polarization in our society and the difficult things that we're living through, there is a fear of expressing what you want or who you are, but also of going beyond whatever structures you see for yourself. So we do have these opportunities, but I think we need to cultivate that curiosity even more, that creativity, that imagination, and going back to that American spirit of you can do this, and we will help you along the way. So those two things combined.
So this is a question that I think transcends K-12 and also covers the higher education system. So obviously the college going rate in Indiana has plummeted since the pandemic, and it's not rebounding. I also think, along those times, just the very nature of higher ed institutions have become increasingly polarized. Folks are, questioning whether or not it's worth it to go to college. So would love maybe start with the folks who, work in higher ed every day. But, one, is this a problem that we've seen a significantly decreasing college going rate in our state, and we don't see a lot of signs of rebounding? And if it is, what might be some ideas to address it?
Sure. So the college going, the demographic cliff and people not going to Valley and so forth, it is a problem, but only to an extent, because when Harvard and the elites have more spots than they have less than applicants, then I'll be worried about if the value of college is there. So that's one thing, right? So schools, the elite schools will always be fine. It is a problem for the R2, the regional schools right there. IU, Purdue, for example, have record class numbers, right? They have 7,000 plus freshmen first years coming in. And they don't have enough space that they're buying houses and buying hotels to be able to get those kids into there. There are, for the regional schools like Ball State, so forth, this is a problem. And the Indiana Commissioner on Higher Education has the best marketing campaign in the country on how to talk about getting into why the value of college is. And it's not based on data. It's not about showing, even though you'll make $1.2 million in a lifetime between a high school degree and a college degree, that's a big difference. But there are things about what the experience of college is going to be like. And those are the best research. And I can send this over so that everybody can look at it. I don't have all the elements memorized, but Indiana higher education has the best way, rationale for going to college.
Well, I will let the experts speak about the enrollment numbers and those things. I think I'll only add on by saying that, you mentioned polarized campuses, and I do see that on the news, but I don't see that at our university. And I think I like working at Ball State. I love working there. And I think, I feel we have a lot of intellectually curious students. We have a high number of first generation students that I like working with. And so I don't see the kinds of polarization at our school that I see at other schools. And I also feel like our students by and large to me really appreciate the opportunity they have. A lot of them, when they're the first person in their family to go to college, they realize the significance and importance of it, and it's nice to be around those students.
Talking about polarization, just some polarization. I just saw this yesterday that all those arrests that happened after the attack on October 7th and so forth that were going on, is that only 3% of all the students that have participated were ever arrested in there. So like 97% of the people that are involved in this and so forth were involved in this polarization. And to echo David's comment, we abide by the University of Chicago principles, which is we're content neutral. We don't speak about things that we can't control. We just do that. And we abide by the freedom of expression, which is really important for us. College is the last place we have in this country where you can expose kids to a variety of viewpoints where you can disagree, but still you can disagree with the idea, but not necessarily the person, and that's okay. We do not have any other opportunity once students leave college to have a civic discourse and think about best idea wins, right? It's about the ideas that there. If you don't like the idea, come up with a better argument and have those conversations. We don't have any other place in the country that can do that. So we very much believe that freedom of expression, and you can have polarization, but we have to do a better job of making sure that you're disagreeing with the idea, not the person, and seeing them as humanity.
So then I put on my K-12 hat and I think about, how do we help support students to understand the value of higher ed? And so quite a bit of it is, first, we're trying to help with a little bit of career exploration, what your aptitude is. So if you know you're interested in the healthcare field, here are the type of courses you may need to take to help you be prepared and know you need to go to higher ed for that job that you really think you're interested in. But then I also think, how hard it is for some of our families, so I would go and get my nails done by someone who was a first generation to this country, and her daughter was getting ready to go off to college, and they had to fill out a FAFSA, and she had no idea in the world how to even begin to go about it. And so how do we make things easier for our students and their families to even be able to get there? So we're trying to find ways to mentor students. How do we connect them? We try to have our teachers, they build great relationships. We work with project leadership in Muncie, different groups that come in and work with our students to help them learn about different opportunities. And so some would say, well, isn't that a family responsibility? But if the families aren't moving in that direction, we owe it to our students to understand their opportunities and their possibilities.
Maybe time for one or two more questions here, because I promised we're going to get out by 9 at the latest. So this is a question, and I'll put my own spin on it. So I was thinking earlier, and actually talking a little bit with Ned, about how I think that the superintendent job in a large, complex school district might be the most challenging job that we could ever come up with, because you have to be an education leader, you have to manage sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, you have to be a politician, you have to, there's just so many things, so many demands. And oftentimes, and this is the question, oftentimes that doesn't just require, technical leadership, around knowing standards, knowing diploma, but it really requires adaptive leadership. And, how do you move values and beliefs, and how do you move the community forward? So not just the superintendent role, but school leaders, classroom teachers across the board. They don't need to be just good technically at their job, but they really got to be adaptive and transformational leaders, given the complexities in our society right now. So we'd just love any thoughts from all four of you, because you all are great leaders in your own right. Just what are kind of your closing thoughts on what's it going to take to have amazing education leaders that are transforming the lives of kids and communities at every system, at every level of the system? And what would be some of your observations and advice for the type of leadership that we need to really meet the demands and the high expectations that we have for the education system?
Leanne, you do this on a daily basis.
Well, so I go back to think of some of, not to beat up higher ed, please, you know how much I respect you. But I go back to some of my coursework I took to prepare me to become a principal or a district level administrator. And I'm not certain that what I was learning helped prepare me for the job. So I think some of it, if we really want people to be ready, we probably need to look back at how we're training and make some changes to what that curriculum and those experiences are. For me, it's all about building a great team. We couldn't do the work we've done in Muncie with, it's never one person alone. So, we made sure that we have great leaders at different levels. Chuck, who's going to be stepping into my shoes in July, fabulous leader. I know he'll keep doing great things with our school district, but we have great leaders in lots of places, down to great teacher leaders. So, we have to keep making sure that, I've said it earlier, finding ways to have career ladders where we're giving our teacher leaders opportunities to really lead, to shine, to inspire, and with some incentives or pay along the way for that. Other jobs don't do it just because it's good to do. They often get some kind of reward or incentive for doing it. So I'd like to be able to keep being innovative and finding ways to do that. And so I just think that you know, it takes everybody. And so, you know, when you get into education, it's a people business. We like people. We want to make sure we're, you know, we build relationships, but boy, we have to hold high standards. And if people aren't doing what they should be doing, we can't just keep having them in those roles. We have to have the courage to keep a strong team and keep that high level of expectation. And that's how you build an excellent system.
Thoughts?
So I think about 4 points. One is enhancing the support systems for educational leaders in different ways, you know, really making them feel they are supported, they are cared for in many different ways, and they are appreciated, which is very important. And there are different levels and different ways of appreciation. So compensation is one, but the human appreciation of thank you for what you're doing for our children, you know, and going also beyond that thank you in supporting them. Understanding so that educational leaders, teachers and others, understand the issues, really, the issues that they're facing. They live it every day, but understanding where they're coming from and helping them to work with their students to confront these issues. So that's where we all come together. Patience. Great patience would be the third element. You know, really cultivate that patience. And curiosity, intellectual curiosity. Always cultivating that intellectual curiosity.
I'll just say quickly, I've worked under a number of principals when I started my career, and then since then under a number of wonderful bosses. But I've always appreciated leaders who keep the ship, you know, on course, but also put a lot of their day-to-day energy into bringing the resources and things needed into the system to support the job, you know, that we were hired to do. And I'll just say I've really appreciated Dr. K. I'm not sure how many more public events you have with MCS, but I feel like you have led in that way and been a model for that type of leadership.
Sure. I'm going to echo David's comments about Dr. K. But two things I've learned in watching leaders in the K-12 context, university, outside academia as well, is the skill set of conflict resolution and de-escalation. That is the number one thing that I try to teach my children and people I work with, is de-escalate as much as possible. And then it's usually the students or the clients come first. And if you're focusing on their learning and their success, all of the other noise washes away. And those are the two things that I've watched happen.
I would really be remiss if I didn't mention, you know, we're very fortunate for the foundations we have in Muncie. And with, you know, we have the Cradle to Career initiative where we're focusing on from birth all the way to career. We have so many community members, Muncie Community Schools team, working to move everybody forward. And so that, again, it's an approach, a community-based approach. Schools can't do it alone. And we have to have others come along with us, support students. And so I just feel that our Cradle to Career initiative is one that the entire nation should look at and really take a hard look at what's happening in Muncie.
Let's give our panel one more round of applause. So I know that I speak for Ned. Just, you know, really incredibly humbled and a lot of gratitude to all of you for spending 2 hours with us tonight. This is a new American dialogue. So this hopefully is the start of ongoing conversations that we can all take back and, you know, continue this conversation going with more and more people. We'll make sure that everybody has access to the video from tonight. And then Ned, do you have any closing remarks?
No, just thank you for coming. It's a much bigger issue than we have been able to discuss tonight, and I apologize for that. Nancy Pappas, who is previously a lobbyist back in my legislative days for schools, gave me the story at the intermission of a teacher in Indianapolis who has done absolutely remarkable things. And I will ask her to send us kind of that story, and I will put it on the document that I add to the website about this evening's event. So we will capture all of this, and some of the questions and comments that we couldn't get to, I will also incorporate. So feel free to go back to the website in a week or so, and we'll hope it provides even more information for you. Thank you so much for your time and for your interest in this very important subject.
And can we give Brandon a round of applause? Minnetrista is such a beautiful facility.
Good night.